Welcome, one and all, to the latest Extra Milestone, the show here on Cinemaholics, where each month we take a trip back in time to discuss one or multiple films celebrating significant anniversary that have gone the extra mile to remain in our memories. I am not John Negroni. I'm actually Sam Noland. I am the usual guest on the Extra Milestone show. With me, I have the one and only pop culture writer for Cinema Blend / staff writer for Cinemaholics, and just all around cool dude, Will Ashton. How's it going, Will?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing, Sam?
You know, I'm doing just fine. We just recorded the main show, talked about Judy. That was a fun time. And if you listen to that, you'll know that John isn't here. The Podfather's away again, and thus we are left to our own devices to do whatever we damn well please.
Should we have like a listener pool to have them guess where John might be this weekend? And the best answer gets I don't know, prize undetermined.
Yeah, like a specifically like a shout out, a video shout out where we just honor them, because that would be the funny thing, is that we actually don't know where John is, or at least I don't. So for all we know, he's like in the Philippines doing some like Mission Impossible thing, saving the world, and we don't even know it's in danger.
So let us know in the comments where you think John is, and the best answer, or at least the funniest answer, will get, I guess, a shout out in the next Extra Milestone.
That's right. Yes. Where in the world is John? We don't know. Okay. And so, yes. Welcome
I didn't know it was a musical.
It is now.
Oh, man.
John's away. We could do whatever we want. What if we did a whole pre-scripted show that was just like some Leonard Bernstein musical? It could only be like 5 minutes, but what if we did it?
Yeah, I can reveal this now because it's probably never going to happen, but one idea for Aunt Ogre Toots Ogre I've kept wanting to do is a full musical episode where we just it was just I don't know if it would just be like everyone singing the whole time, or if it would be like 5 different musical numbers, but I keep bringing up with my host, Matt Serafini. He's like, that, because he would have to probably write and compose most of the music. And he's like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So
it'd have to be like the Umbrellas of Cherbourg, where it's not even, you're just sort of going about your day, and it's like normal dialogue, but you just happen to be singing it. I'm going to the show later tonight. Hopefully it'll be good, but I'm kind of tired. Maybe I'll go home instead. Just for an hour straight.
Basically like that, or Les Miserables.
There you go.
Just theatrically singing the whole thing.
Yeah. Get Russell Crowe on for that one. That'll be a barn burner. Barn borner. Sound like Mickey Rourke. Yes, but regardless, with all that jazz out of the way, this is the 7th Extra Milestone. It really should be the 9th, because we've fallen behind a couple times, and as a matter of fact, this will likely not come out until very early October. So
hopefully,
this is we're doing another double header. We're doing the Wham Hour part 2. I'll call it, just because why not? The Wham Hour 2 Electric Boogaloo, and as a way to attempt to catch up to the actual month that it is. So we're talking about the milestone for August and for September. So we made the decision, we don't have time to do the poll for September. So we sort of made a series of, trifling executive decisions on what we were going to talk about for that month. And we sort of to rethink some things going forward.
Should we talk about the ones that we almost, thought about doing, or should we just, leave it up to the listener to assume or guess?
No, I think that's a good idea. I think I like the way that we did it last month, where we talked about that stuff first, because it sort of build up to the big kahuna at the end.
Okay.
So
do you remember them?
I've got them all listed right here.
Okay.
So our options for August were The Wizard of Oz, which would have been relevant, because as it turns out, we ended up doing this around the time that Judy comes out in late September, which the two of us got to review. So that would have been cool to have a little synergy there. But alas, we decided against that. Another candidate we had for the month of August was North by Northwest, which, as much as I wanted to, I actually haven't seen that one. So as much as I wanted to maybe check it out and talk about it, you very vehemently stated like, no, I've got a commitment.
Well, it's not that I have a commitment. I just made a promise to my aunt that I'd see it with her, so I didn't want to break that promise. So
yeah,
that was the only one I abstained from. I was like, I can't. I'll agree to whatever one you want to. I mean, I'll make a case for the ones I want to do more, but that was the only one where I had to put my foot down and be like, I couldn't do that for personal reasons.
Yeah. It's, the time will come, and that's certainly been on my list for a long time. But today is not the day, as it turns out. Another option we had was Mary Poppins, which would have been somewhat relevant because there was a sequel last year, which I didn't see actually. How was that?
It's all right. Yeah, it's, I think I enjoyed it more while I was watching it than in retrospect. Like, I think thinking it over, the flaws have been a little more apparent.
Interesting. And
it's certainly no original Mary Poppins, which I still consider a great classic. But yeah, it's all right. It's like a fine rental. A little too long. Maybe one too many musical numbers in them. But it's fine.
Interesting. Yeah, it would have been kind of cool to talk about the original Mary Poppins, but when I really thought about it, I'm like, is there really obviously it's a really, really good movie, but is there enough to like dive into? That was kind of my thought with it.
I mean, there is, but I feel like a lot of that ground's been covered, like the whole like Mrs. Banks, like the stuff with the author that that was in Surviving Mr. Banks. Yeah. Like how like the author of the Mary Poppins book was like crying throughout the premiere and stuff. It's been basically covered pretty extensively at this point. Yeah.
It's it's worth talking about nonetheless, but just not here. Another one we had is A Hard Day's Night, which I wrote an article about a few months ago reviewing that. That's another one where I was like, it's fun, it's cool, but is there enough to like really just go head first into? Yeah, who knows? Maybe there is, but I guess we won't find out. That's going to be the theme of a lot of these. It's like, hey, here's what we're not going to go into any detail about. I love it. Yeah. Another one we had was Life of Brian. Okay. Which is pretty neat. I like it. I think I prefer Holy Grail. We talked about this last month when we were listing the nominees. But yeah, it would have been cool if only to just like go through the movie and just sort of like quote the jokes. That's, next year is going to be, Monty Python and the Holy Grail is going to be eligible. So if that ends up winning, that's just going to be most of it is just quoting the movie. And I'm ready to do so. Gosh dang it.
Okay. Not really looking forward to that.
Well, all right. maybe it's not meant to be then. Another one we had, this came very close to winning, was Apocalypse Now, which just saw the release.
I thought it was going to win.
Of the final cut. I thought so too. And, the way that we set up the poll, it technically sort of did, but ultimately we decided like, there's almost too much to get into, weirdly enough.
I mean, to be fair, I think it was more you than me. I was just like, okay. Yeah. But I do want to check that out someday.
It's one of my favorites. And another one we had, this one like never had a chance, but it was celebrating an anniversary, was Natural Born Killers. Would have been cool to go back to.
Yeah, not a big fan of that one, but I'm not heartbroken that one didn't get picked.
Nor am I. The other one was The Iron Giant, which we debated.
That one I'm a little heartbroken.
Yeah. It's I can tell it's a movie that I have a very, very tenuous history with, or not tempestuous history with. So maybe it would have been a little too personal for me, but who knows? Another one we had was The Sixth Sense. So also never had a chance, but it's cool. It still holds up, I think. That is it's worth going back to, I think, especially to see sort of where Shyamalan started as opposed to where he is now. But regardless, none of those ended up winning. What we did decide to go with is a little movie called On the Waterfront, which is a movie that is very significant and very acclaimed, and yet isn't really talked about that much. Or is that just me? Like, am I just not listening to the right circles, or do you find the same thing, William?
I wouldn't say it's not talked about. I mean, it's not. I don't know if it's talked about as much as some of the other movies we discussed on the show, but it's definitely. I mean, like people bring up like I could have been a contender, all the time and stuff like that, and then like I think Marlon Brando's performance is more discussed in the film itself. I'd say.
Yeah, I think it's not getting the what am I trying to say here? It's not getting like the consistent acclaim, I think, as the years go on. It feels to me like it's sort of fading into not necessarily obscurity, but sort of that rarefied position held by certain, like, you know, classics of a certain kind, of a certain, you know, atmosphere that everyone heard, like, hears about and knows about, but like not everyone's actually seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's definitely a film of its time. I think I think even maybe more so than some of the other movies we talked about, it feels very much like a film of the 50s or the 40s.
Yeah.
Like the aesthetic of it, the style of it might seem a bit like old fashioned to a point where I don't know if it'll appeal to younger audiences as much as some of the other ones we might have discussed. But I think maybe in that sense it might. I still feel weird if calling this obscure, though. I feel it's a pretty well talked about film, just maybe not as much as some of the others we've discussed.
Yeah. No, I'm not calling it obscure by any means, but yeah. So in case you don't know, let's give a little bit of the background details on the Waterfront, which, by the way, is celebrating its 65th anniversary, which is crazy. This movie is old enough to be like a great grandparent, which is strange to think about, even though I was not even remotely around when it came out. On the Waterfront is directed by Elia Kazan, who, through like the 50s and 60s and even some of the late 40s, was one of the more rather prominent directors of Hollywood. He's a Greek-American director who emigrated to America sometime in the 40s. I don't have the exact date in front of me, and made a lot of movies that were very critical of America. Just very forthrightly said, hey, there's a lot of stuff going on here that is, you know, needs to be dealt with. And it's causing a lot of trouble. And so we need to talk about it. One of the more, not necessarily famous ones, but I think one of the more well regarded ones by those who know what it is A Face in the Crowd. Have you heard about that one or seen it?
Oh yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah,
that one's really solid. He also did A Streetcar Named Desire, which is probably his second most famous movie, based on a play by Tennessee Williams, and also starring Marlon Brando.
Marlon Brando, yeah.
That was 1951, so they had a significant history before that. And as we said, stars Marlon Brando in the title role as Terry Malloy, who I believe was like in his late 20s at the time that this was being filmed. So you can just see, like, if you want to see little baby Brando sort of just taking the acting world by storm, this is the place to go, is On the Waterfront. And so how this movie sort of came about is that it was inspired by a series of articles by investigative journalist Malcolm Johnson, who wrote for the New York Sun, and published like a 24-part series of articles called Crime on the Waterfront, which was sort of getting into the nitty-gritty details of the corruption that was going on the docks among longshoremen who were sort of being infiltrated by the mob, who were taking it into their own hands. Those articles were won the Pulitzer Prize awards a few times. And this movie has a very long history when it comes to like how it was actually made. So settle in, Will, because there's a lot of stuff.
Okay.
So Elia Kazan, the director, and acclaimed playwright Arthur Miller were good friends. Arthur Miller wrote Death of a Salesman, which you'll probably know. They were good friends. Arthur Miller wrote a screenplay called The Hook, which would eventually become On the Waterfront. Elia Kazan said, okay, cool, I'll direct it. They pitched it to studio head Harry Cohn at Columbia Pictures, who's a despicable human being, by the way. I read one paragraph, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is horrifying. Just everything that you've heard about like how evil studio heads can be. This guy was that.
Okay.
Harry Cohn said, okay, but in the original screenplay of The Hook, it was the bad guys were just sort of like, mob members who took over the docks and were sort of enforcing their will. Harry Cohn said, okay, but I want them specifically to be communist. Because this is right in the era of, the Second Red Scare and McCarthyism and stuff. So there was a lot of politically charged intentions when it came to studio product. And so Arthur Miller refused to do that out of what, to my understanding, was some sort of sympathy that he had for communists who were sort of being called out and being sort of ostracized by the government and stuff. And so it was made really awkward then when, like, a year later, Elia Kazan famously named like 8 communists who were among the studio system, like named names and stuff, and was a whistleblower essentially. And Arthur Miller was sort of not having that. And so when Elia Kazan asked Arthur Miller, hey, we need to do a rewrite on this script, Arthur Miller said, you know what? No, I didn't like what you did. And they didn't talk for 10 years. And then what happened after that is that Arthur Miller traveled to Salem, Massachusetts, and researched the witch trials of the 17th century, and then wrote The Crucible, which you're likely familiar with, as a direct response to this, and sort of likened the situation to all the blacklist stuff that was going on in the 50s. And then, likewise, Elia Kazan went his own separate way and made On the Waterfront, which was his response to what was going on. So it's interesting to see how art reflects sort of what's going on in the artist's mind. So what happened after that was Elia Kazan got a different screenwriter, Bud Schulberg, to write the new script, pitched to studio head Daryl Zanuck, who's actually a rather good studio head and made a lot of progress. That were it not for the things he did, we'd see a very different film industry today. Unfortunately, Daryl Zanuck hated the script, said, who's going to want to watch a movie with a bunch of sweaty longshoremen, and just didn't even remotely see the point. So they're like, okay, lost cause here. Let's go to independent producer Sam Spiegel, who made a deal with Columbia, and it's continued to sort of like badger Bud Schulberg to perfect the script, and it really angered Bud Schulberg, and he does not think fondly of this. And in the script, a lot of the characters were based off of actual people in history. Specifically, Terry Malloy, Marlon Brando's character, is based on whistleblower Anthony DiVincenzo, who, after On the Waterfront came out, actually successfully sued Columbia and won like an out-of-court settlement, I think, because he said, hey, this is my story, more or less, like almost to the detail. I never gave any permission for this, because what happened was Bud Schulberg was like sitting in on court hearings and was sort of taking notes like, hey, I have an idea for a movie. Here's what's going on. And Johnny Friendly, the mob boss in the movie, played by Lee J. Cobb, was based off of Albert Anastasia, who was a notorious crime boss. So all this is to say that the movie went through a lot before it came out, to the point where it was actually kind of like a totally different movie from beginning to end. And then when it came to the casting process, when Marlon Brando was approached to play the role, he refused initially, just wasn't interested, said, no, I'm not doing it. I'm doing something else. So they cast Frank Sinatra, sort of unofficially. I don't know if you knew this. Frank Sinatra was initially going to play the Marlon Brando role. And I don't know if you've ever seen Frank Sinatra act in a movie. He's not a particularly good actor. Have you seen like the original Ocean's 11, for instance?
The original Ocean's 11, no.
Okay, yeah. it's Frank Sinatra was in a lot of those Rat Pack movies, and other like various sort of big studio stuff. Was very famous for just sort of not really being into what was going on, and sort of insisted on only doing a couple of takes before he got bored, essentially, and refused to do more. So they decided, like, this is going to be a way to coerce Marlon Brando into joining the role, even to the point where Elia Kazan asked Carl Malden, who plays Father Barry in the movie, to film a screen test with Paul Newman in the Marlon Brando role, showed it to Marlon Brando and said, "Hey, do you really want this Newman guy to take over this role?" And Brando was like, "All right, fine, I'll do it." And so it's like, I wonder what would have happened had it been Frank Sinatra or Paul Newman. I wonder what kind of world would we be living in if it played out this way. Obviously, Frank Sinatra was very angry, but that sort of went nowhere, which is vaguely amusing to me. One thing, another bit of casting information was that the love interest, Edie Doyle, who was eventually played by Eva Marie Saint, was almost played by another actress named Elizabeth Montgomery, who never really got to a big prestige position in the industry. And ultimately, what did make the decision was that Elia Kazan said, "Oh, Eva Marie Saint has this more real feeling to her, because she grew up in Hoboken, New Jersey, if memory serves, where the movie takes place. So it was decided that she would be a more authentic actress in the role." And one other bit of casting information is that Charlie, Terry Malloy's brother in the movie, was originally going to be played by Lawrence Tierney. Do you know who that is?
Sounds familiar.
Lawrence Tierney plays Joe Cabot in Reservoir Dogs, the guy who says, "And you're going to be Mr. Pink, and you're Mr. Blue, and Mr. Blonde." And way back in 1954. But what ultimately convinced him to go against it was that he asked for too much money, which is weird, because it's strange to think of how an actor that is not really remembered terribly well now was once in a position where that could happen. And so who was ultimately cast was Rod Steiger, who was a very active actor at the time, who I knew best from playing the lead character in the TV version of Marty, which would be remade into a feature film with Ernest Borgnine, who won Best Actor. So I don't know if you've ever seen that. Have you ever seen Marty, Will?
No, that's been on my list for some time, though.
It's really good. I really loved it. And it's weird to see like the contrast with the TV version. But yeah, so Rod Steiger plays Charlie, the older brother of Marlon Brando's character, when in reality Rod Steiger is a year younger than Marlon Brando. So this is movie magic at its finest. But yeah, On the Waterfront debuted in August of 1954, and I believe it went wide the following month in September. So technically kind of qualifies for both months that we're doing. So it's kind of very nice synergy there. And it came out, was met like immediately with just widespread acclaim. Everyone loved it, said this is going to change the art form forever. And lo and behold, it did. It got 12 Oscar nominations in the 1955 Academy Awards, of which it won 8 of them, which is tremendously impressive. It won Best Picture, Best Director for Elia Kazan, Best Actor Marlon Brando, best I forget if it's adapted or original screenplay, but that was Bud Schulberg.
Would it be adapted? As if it's
I think
based
it would
on that
be
Crime on the Waterfront?
It's not directly based on it. It's more inspired by it. Sort of like
I know like the
from
rules.
Ideas.
I mean, the rules for the screenplay stuff is pretty like explicit that if it's based on even like a thing that was made prior in some form or another, that it is adapted. Like that's why. Like Whiplash is like, and like he took a scene from his script and turned into a short film to make it into a movie, and then the movie got made from that funding, but like it's still considered an adapted screenplay because it was from that short film. So like even if it's like loosely connected to something else, it's usually adapted. So I'm gonna take a guess and say it's an adapted screenplay win.
Okay, so the technically award I have here is called Best Story and Screenplay. So I wonder
That must have been before original and adapted, I guess.
I suppose so. Yeah, it must be because I know that the other movie we're talking about, which happened to be released the same year, was nominated for the other award, which was simply Best Screenplay. So I'm thinking that this is in the quote unquote original category. So yeah, Schulberg won for that. And then after that, it also won Best Cinematography, who was cinematographer Boris Kaufman, who off the top of my head, I actually recognized from 12 Angry Men, did the cinematography for that. So, and has one of the same actors too. So that's very nice. Also won Best Editing and Best Black and White Art Direction. It lost Best Score, which was Leonard Bernstein, who actually did a lot of musicals besides this. And it got 3 nominations for Best Supporting Actor. So that is the first of 2 Marlon Brando movies to get 3 supporting actor nominations before The Godfather. It was Lee J. Cobb, Carl Malden, and Rod Steiger. All of them lost, get this, to Edmund O'Brien in The Barefoot Contessa. That classic, right?
Why did we talk about that one since it's always so referenced and adored? I know.
Yeah, The Barefoot Contessa. Everyone knows The Barefoot Contessa, right?
Yeah. So what award did that win?
Say again?
No, which one did that win? Barefoot, whatever it's called.
Oh, supporting actor.
Oh.
Yeah.
And that beat who?
That beat Lee J. Cobb, who was the mob boss.
I was going to say, yeah, he's terrific in that. So I'm surprised. I don't know what this other performance is. He's really good in this.
Yeah. And also nominated was Carl Malden, who plays the pastor.
Right.
And
yeah, it was also great.
And Rod Steiger, who's Charlie Terry's brother, who is has that conversation in the back of the car that's quite iconic. The movie
he was less so, but he's still fine.
Yeah, not in it as much. Wouldn't get the same amount of attention today probably, but was a different time. So what are you going to do? In 1989, On the Waterfront was inducted into the National Film Registry, as have a lot of the extra milestones we've discussed. Made it onto AFI's Top 100 Movies list. Both lists, in fact. In 1998, it made number 8, and in 2007 made number 19. So at this rate, it's probably like, in the 40s or somewhere, but who knows? It's time that AFI got their act together. Put out another list. Show us where you're at right now. But regardless, that's kind of what went into the background of the movie. That's kind of just like a snapshot of it. Obviously, there's, every movie has a lot that goes into it, but that's sort of the gist of it. And so came out, it's been 65 years since it came out, and it's been hailed as a classic all the while, and for good reason, I think. There are a few very famous lines and scenes from it, but when it comes to the actual movie, Will, what is your experience with On the Waterfront? Like, had you seen it before we did this episode?
Yeah, I saw it in college.
Nice. Was it any special occasion, or you just happened to catch it somewhere?
No, I saw it in film class.
Nice.
Yeah, I think just a general film introduction course. I don't think it was like any specific theme, if I can recall correctly. But this time, yeah, it was my second time seeing it. The first outside of a class setting where I wasn't really like studying each scene for its like historic relevance and like artistic achievements. Just kind of better to just kind of enjoy it as a film. And I think I liked it more this time, though. I mean, I still really enjoyed it when I first saw it. But I definitely think the main thing that I think gets celebrated, and rightfully so, is Marlon Brando's performance, which I think basically does live up to the hype. I mean, there's a lot that has been said about his performance, and I don't think it's undeserved, because he really it is like a classic Brando performance, and you've seen, like, if you watch this performance, you see where so many other actors have like tried to emulate this kind of style. It's funny, I think you mentioned either at the beginning of the episode or before we recorded, like, Mickey Rourke, but I constantly think about like I feel like so many Mickey Rourke performances are trying to like do this, to like sometimes good, and I mean, like, because like, I mean, Rourke has obviously done some great work as well, but it, like, you know, like, I mean, I can't think of I'm sure there are other actors, but they're escaping my mind at the moment. But yeah, it's a very iconic performance. It's a very well regarded performance, and I think it's pretty amazing that, like, I was paying attention more this time. Like, the most famous scene in the movie, like the car scene that we were referring to earlier. I believe if I remember correctly, that was like all improvised, right? Like, that was like the scene that they kind of like threw in last minute to make it work.
Not exactly. What happened was that
but I figured I was gonna say, because it seemed like it's like half written, half not. Is that what happened?
It's sort of like that. Basically, what happened was that it was written, it was in the script, and Marlon Brando was so inclined to improvise that he sort of started going off book a little bit. And Rod Steiger, who's also in the scene, was like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna go with this." And then Elia Kazan was like, "Hey, knock that off, stick to the script." And so what the scene ultimately resulted as is more or less what was in the script. But obviously, Brando was the one who really gave it life and really gave it some heft and some pathos to it. So I think it all worked out fine in the end.
Yeah, it just seemed like some of the stuff at the beginning was probably improv, but I don't know. I wasn't there. Yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of hard to think like what hasn't really been said about this film that you know, hasn't been echoed throughout 60 years of cinema. It's a really solid film, and I think I liked it even more this time. But I mean, I will say I don't think it's like a perfect film. Like, I do think it makes sense that it is as highly acclaimed, like in like the top 10 at one point for the AFI for a reason. But I mean, I think it's a movie that has like a lot of really great moments. A lot of moments are like highly watchable and very entertaining, but there are also a couple moments scattered throughout that are like not bad, but just like a little more kind of old fashioned, dated in a way that like kind of feels a little corny.
Yeah.
In a way that I think make it less accessible to modern audiences. And I don't know if you feel that way or not.
I see what you're saying. I find it endearing though. I think it,
sure.
I think it,
I'm not saying it's unendearing, but yeah, I mean, I just think that like there's just some moments that are just like, you know, outstanding, phenomenal. I mean, especially like basically every scene with the priest is top notch, and all the scenes with the mob boss are pretty good. But like there's some things like the whole like the trial scene kind of feels a little rushed in the scheme of the narrative, and little stuff like that feels like kind of like of its time, like the way it's presented in the film. You know, like, yo, regret it, or whatever the line is, like, yo.
You won't work in another dock from here to Florida,
like
or something like that.
Right, yeah, like, that's kind of feels like of its time and stuff. But like
Lee J. Cobb is a great like yeller of things, you know.
Yeah.
Like, I think specifically of 12 Angry Men. Like, they're all rotten, all of them. Mm-hmm. You know, kids, you throw your life away, and then just burst into tears. Lee J. Cobb is a very intense persona. Yeah, we'll get into the actual plot in a second. First, I just want to specify the way I originally saw it. I was also in college, and what happened was it was not specifically assigned to me, but I rewatched Raging Bull, which is one of my favorite movies, and Raging Bull actually references this directly, where Robert De Niro says, like, you know, I'm reminded of Marlon Brando's famous scene from On the Waterfront, where he says, I could have been a contender. And it sort of really reflects on the arc of Jake LaMotta. And I just so happen to have rewatched Rocky around the same time, which is very heavily influenced by On the Waterfront as well.
Oh, yeah, that's the other actor I was thinking of, Stallone.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that didn't come to me sooner, but yeah, Stallone obviously has obviously been influenced by Brando, I'd have to say.
Yeah, it could have been a contender, you know?
Yeah. Hey.
You know, I could have been somebody instead of nobody. You know how that feels? It doesn't feel very good, not at all. We've done enough Stallone impressions for one, you know, for several months worth of podcasting. But yeah, so I watched that.
Can you imagine though, Stallone with the pigeons?
With the pigeons, like,
Yeah.
Yeah, go.
But they have to do this to them.
Throw the pigeons away. You know, what are you doing to that? You
Yeah.
killed my kid brother. I can't believe it. This is I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I gotta fight back. I gotta march right up to there and say, hey, you know, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Oh goodness, we're too silly for
just go up to them and just be like, hey, knock it off.
Hey, stop that. What are you gonna do? Oh goodness, this is brilliant. Yeah, so yeah, that's how I watched it. I saw it in 2017. That was, and I was like, wow, this is pretty damn good. It was one of those movies that I sort of like knew a lot about. Like I knew the plot and stuff. I just never actually seen the damn thing, and so it was good to finally have done it. Then I didn't watch it again until just a few days ago for this episode, and I was like, yep, still holds up. This is pretty dang, pretty solid. I think we can get like directly into our thoughts. So in case you don't know, we're about to get into the plot of it. We've revealed parts of it, but nothing that ruins the movie. If for whatever reason you haven't seen On the Waterfront, and there's a good chance that you have, because again, this isn't one that's being pushed as hard as I think the argument I would make. Like, I think, specifically even the year 1954, I was looking at what are the most popular movies from that year, and On the Waterfront is sort of further down on the list than maybe its reputation would suggest. It goes, I think, Seven Samurai and Rear Window, our other movie that we'll get to here in a little while. Those are the ones that are still being like talked about more so than On the Waterfront, I think. So there's a good chance that this one never. There's just never enough of a reason to see that. But I think what we're both sort of landing on here is that, yeah, this is still really good, and this still holds a lot of weight. So by all means, check it out if you haven't already. And so with that, I think let's talk about the movie itself. So it starts. We open on the docks of Hoboken, where the boats come in, they unload the crates, they lift them up in big nets and stuff, and then distribute them out throughout the city. It opens up there. Marlon Brando, Terry Malloy, goes up to the apartment building where another longshoreman lives and says, "Hey, what's your name?" I forget the character's name. Go up to the roof. Someone wants to talk to you." And then it turns out there are two mob enforcers up there, and they throw the guy off the roof because he was about to testify in court as to the shady goings on behind the scenes. And I think right off the bat we get this like really, really sort of ominous establishment of the status quo. Like, yep, this is the world we live in, where it's sort of this Goodfellas mentality of, hey, keep your mouth shut and never rat on your friends or something like that. I think it's really impressive at establishing the status quo of what's going on. And I think what's even more impressive is the way that we realize with almost no dialogue whatsoever, that Marlon Brando had no idea that he was facilitating a murder. Like, I think that is one of the more impressive things, is the way this movie starts. And that is what sort of kicks off the journey that Marlon Brando goes on. I think did this opening scene like strike you in any way?
I mean, it's not my favorite scene in the film, but I think it's pretty effective for what it's communicating. Yeah,
I think it really announces right up front, like, hey, this movie is going to get into some real heavy stuff. So it's sort of bringing up this issue of like loyalty to your superiors versus honesty and justice. I think this movie is very clearly defined in where it stands on that, given the background of Elia Kazan and just how it all turns out. And what happens from there is that the sister of the guy who was killed was thrown off the roof. Edie, played again by Eva Marie Saint, finds herself in a romantic relationship with Marlon Brando, and they ultimately decide, like, hey, there's a lot of corruption going on, and there's a lot of killing and a lot of death, and someone needs to take a stand, but everyone's afraid to, because they have this unofficial policy called D&D, which stands for deaf and dumb, which means, hey, I don't know anything. That's pretty much the whole mentality. And so as long as you maintain that, I don't know anything, then you'll be fine until we decide that you won't be anymore. And so it's really
it would have been fun if it was Dungeons and Dragons.
I was going to say that, yeah. Every time they kept saying it, I'm like, what, Dungeons and Dragons? Oh, no, that's right. It's Deaf and Dumb. It really sets this kill or be killed world really nicely. I really get a sense that, like, yeah, this is really going on. It's got this real grungy, gritty feeling to it, with everything from the cinematography to just the, grimy waterside town that they all live on. I really like the just the aesthetic of this movie, especially with the cinematography from Boris Kaufman, who's able to really, in subtle ways, manages to really give an impression of how a place feels. Again, I go back to 12 Angry Men. You really get a sense of how claustrophobic that room is, especially as the movie goes on. And again, with this, I really, I can practically smell the sea air drifting off from the ocean. So, I think that's really impressive. I think, I want to ask you, Will Ashton, what is so we've alluded a lot to Marlon Brando's performance. I want to get into some specifics here, because I think this is a movie very much about Terry's journey into basically deciding, hey, you know what, we got to stand up for ourselves as workers. We have rights, and it's they're, as it turns out, they're not going to be easy to get, but if I don't do it, then who knows if anyone else will. I want to know what got to you the most about this performance, because it's sort of changed the way that actors go about acting in a lot of ways. It's got this it was really influential in what we would now call like the what's the word? Not method acting, but really sort of layered, nuanced acting. I'll remember the name in a second, but do go on. What did you like about Marlon Brando in this?
Well, I mean, as far as what you're referring to is like the legacy or what it inspired, it feels like the type of performance that's like I guess intentionally kind of imperfect, and that like it's like it's not as mumbly as I think you might anticipate some of the later Brando performances, but it does feel like a little more natural, like he's kind of just acting in the moment, not as like reading the script, but just kind of like emoting and kind of like talking to himself, kind of trying to figure out his headspace. And it feels a lot more natural, but it's also fairly theatrical as far as how it's done. Mm-hmm. And there's like this kind of like brooding charisma to it that, it's kind of hard to take your eyes off of. And there's like this kind of like sullen demeanor that I think a lot of people have tried to emulate. And, also kind of like a bruised pretty boy kind of mentality, where he's like, like the tough guy with a chip on his shoulder, but he has a sensitive side, but he's also like trying to fight the corruption that's around him, but also not really sure how to do it. And it's just like that balance and those layers of performance, I think, really stood out at this time. Yeah, naturalistic is the word I was looking for, by the way. Mm-hmm. I was surprised with both viewings by like, he doesn't have as many lines, like actual spoken words of dialogue, as other leads might. He's very much sort of reacting to a situation, at least like in the beginning parts of the movie. Yeah. Well, I mean, we know that Brando was never really a fan of lines. Fair enough. To begin with. I'm sure this was before the like putting the lines on cue cards around the stage or the set phase of his career, but yeah, I think he's always more interested in emoting as opposed to like delivering lines, and that's just been his acting style from the beginning, and that was probably vindicated through this performance and its acclaim. He's got more of a presence just through being somewhere rather than saying things, I feel like. Mm-hmm. You even think of like the opening scene of The Godfather, where it's just that one guy saying like, I believe in America, please Godfather help me, and he's just sort of there, not really saying anything, but just controlling the entire room very clearly. So yeah, I think you're right. It's a very
very sullen. I like that word. Very sullen performance. And I like the way how, and I like the way in this movie how he's clearly sort of walking this line of naivete, I want to say. Just sort of like wanting to stand up for himself, but not quite having the courage to do so. So when it finally gets to the end, after this court case where he just, he says, hey, here's what's going on the docks. Stuff's been going down and I'm finally ready to, here's everything that's happening. And you're going to put these mob bosses away where they belong. And then in the final finale of the movie where, physically confronts, Johnny Friendly, which is a brilliant mob boss name, by the way. Johnny Friendly, Lee J. Cobb, and has that physical altercation, almost like practically gets beaten to death, but still gets up anyway and says, we're not gonna be taken down so easily. It's basically, we're not gonna take it, the movie, before that song was written. Although it's much more complex and nuanced than that. I think, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, there's like a kind of like wounded animal mentality to him.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Like in the beginning of the movie, like he has like kind of like this bruised ego and like this I don't want to use the term again, but like this chip on his shoulder about like his boxing career being taken away from him, kind of like against his will, and he feels like he has like this potential and this like desire to be better than he is, but like the one thing he knew how to do and do well was taken from him fairly prematurely, and now, like you said, he's like almost 30 and he's expected to kind of have his life figured out, but he just doesn't know like what should fill that gap. And he now he has like this kind of love in his life and this like desire to basically unionize and strike up against the oppressive figures in his life. And then like by the end of the movie, like you said, he's like physically very much beaten down, but his spirit now is like finally burning alive, and that's like kind of what keeps him, like, he's still like this wounded animal, but now like he has like this kind of fire in his belly that was absent at the beginning and the middle of the film.
That's where I feel like that's where a lot of the Rocky stuff comes from. Like, it's not about how many times you get knocked down. It's about how many times you can get back up and keep fighting. It's that kind of in a nutshell. A very, very fun to watch nutshell. And I think for as like sort of downtrodden as a lot of this movie feels, I like the way that it ends on a very optimistic note where it's like, this will lead to good. And I think that finale where all the workers walk through those doors at last, free of, being stiffed out of a job or something, that is where the ultimate statement comes that we need to be vigilant about pointing out, the wrongdoings in our world. I think that's Elia Kazan. That's where that reaction comes from, the whole McCarthyism thing, saying like we have sort of an obligation to do right by our country, essentially, which is so bizarre. Considering,
well, not even like your country, just like your fellow man's, basically, is like the theme throughout this movie.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it.
Like that's like the whole priest. Like the priest is basically like spouting the thesis of the movie like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
And while that's a very charismatic, entertaining performance, I do feel like there's at least like maybe one too many scenes where it's like, okay, like we get the thesis of the movie. Elliot Kazan, like we get what you're trying to say. But yeah, no, I agree with you.
It's a movie that's kind of on the nose with a lot of its messaging. There's not a whole lot of like, and I wasn't like looking every second, but there's not a whole lot of like symbolism or allegory that I could detect besides the political stuff. The pigeons, maybe so, but that's kind of surfacey, I feel. Just about,
it is, but I mean, it's something. Yeah, I mean, but it's something.
Fair enough.
Trying to say.
Yeah, I think something I want
the hooks.
Say again?
And the hooks.
Oh yeah, the hooks. The iron hook of tyranny that will enslave us all if we're not careful and will kill us all.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I kind of take the ending as a little more bittersweet than I guess you do.
Yeah.
Because, like, I agree with you. Like, I think that's, like, the intent, but there's also, like, kind of, like, this, like, sadness of, like, he's going to be, like, a clog in the machine. And, like, that's, he's, like, not really going to be, like, the contender that he, like, wants to be, but he is, like, helping his fellow man. So there is, like, kind of, like, that nice kind of contrast there where he's, like, he's found his purpose, but he's realized that it's kind of, like, through helping others as opposed to, like, living on his legacy. So...
Interesting.
I guess, yeah.
I had not thought about that. I think that segues into something that one last thing I wanted to talk about, and then we can move on to our B feature, if you will, is how you mentioned thinking that this isn't a perfect movie, and I think I agree. And I want to know what are some of the flaws you think with this movie?
I think we addressed most of them. Like I said, I mean, I think it's just a really well-made movie.
Yeah.
I just think that it's kind of like old fashioned in a way that, I don't know, you just kind of, like you said, you can kind of tell like what, like it's not subtle in what it's trying to say. Maybe that's for the better, maybe it's not, but just like it does often feel like there are like 2 or 3 moments where the movie's kind of like preaching to you about what it's trying to say, as opposed to just kind of like incorporating it into like the story, or maybe like something like a little more subtle, like Brando's performance. But yeah, I mean, I think that's like the main gist of what I'd consider the flaws of the film to be. I mean, I also think that, like I like the romance in the film, but it does, I think I find myself less engaged whenever like the romance is involved as opposed to the rest of the film. I don't know if you felt that way, like in contrast to it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I still really like it. And I would say the only other flaw was just that like some of the stuff feels kind of rushed, like with the brother and with the like trial. Like it just kind of feels like that's like kind of put in really fast.
Yeah.
To like get the plot moving, because otherwise it was kind of like more casual and breezy in his approach, and it's just like, oh, we gotta get the story moving along. And here's the brother stuff, here's the trial, and all right, let's get back to Brando brooding.
Brooding Brando, I love it. Yeah, I think
but that's it's not like when I complain about that stuff, it's like not really complaints, it's just kind of like more nitpicks than anything else. Because like I said, I think it's a really well made movie, and I think it's really solid, and it's definitely something you can really engage with, but I just don't think it's perfect, like I said.
I think I'd compare this movie to Casablanca in the sense that it's very clearly like a studio movie that's sort of checking off certain boxes in the process of telling its own story as much as it possibly can. Just when it comes to like, all right, we got to have a romantic lead. We got to have a scene where this happens and that happens. And we got to have, a family member and stuff like that. And I think in that sense, the movie feels, just when going back to it now, the journey, I feel like is maybe a little bit more apparent in following a formula nowadays.
And it's also a matter of we've seen so many movies now that followed the formula made by this movie, so it's kind of hard to like look at it with fresh eyes.
Yeah,
but
that's a good point.
That's what we try to do.
I think it inspired a lot of movies that frankly are better than this. Honestly, I think I much prefer Raging Bull to this. I think that's the much better movie. Have you seen Raging Bull, by the way?
Yeah. Of course, yeah.
Okay, good. Thank goodness. I was worried about that.
It's great.
That came out in 1980, so we might get to talk about that next year. So who knows? I look forward to that if that ever happens. But I think I was trying to figure out like, why am I not connecting to this as much as I think audiences of the time did? And I think part of the reason is that I don't feel like the backstory of I was once a boxer or a contender for being a boxer in like the heavyweight championship or whatever it's called.
Bum.
Yeah, I think I don't feel like that was sold enough. Of how like I could have been somebody. We never really see that. And
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, I think we don't really need to see that though. Like, I think we kind of get it through Brando's performance.
But I also don't get.
I get what you're saying.
Because what happens? We find out that his brother convinced him to throw a fight so that he could win some money, and he did, and that functionally ended his career. And I don't know. I don't know the ins and outs of the boxing world, but I'm wondering, like, is that enough to destroy a career? Like, maybe the times were different, so who knows? But yeah, it's just something that takes me out of it a little bit, where I'm like, okay, this is, I'm just not connecting to this as much as everyone else. So that's kind of it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think it's just that, kind of like what I was alluding to earlier. I think it's just that the movie often opts to tell as opposed to show.
Yeah.
A lot of things, and sometimes I think it's effective, like the contender scene, like with him in the car. Like I think it's effective in that scene, but like there's other times, where it's just like movie relies more on characters just kind of explicitly saying what they feel or what they're trying to communicate, as opposed to showing it in a kind of more subtle way. But at the same time, it's still a very cinematic movie, and I think the great moments are truly great for a reason.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think it's worth celebrating, and I'm glad that we had a chance to do so here on the Extra Milestone. I believe the time has come, Will Ashton, to move on to our second feature of the week.
Sure.
Or of the month, rather. Celebrating also 65 years, came out in 1954. It is Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window. Now, before we get into this, there were the other contenders for September that we didn't have time to announce or put on a poll or anything. So I think now is the time to give those a little bit of attention. First one is Carol Reed's The Third Man, starring Orson Welles. Have you ever seen this?
I haven't seen it, no.
It's a very famous noir in which Orson Welles plays a character named Harry Lime, who famously doesn't show up for like a really long time into the movie, but is talked about constantly. And it's very famous for that.
And the opening.
And the opening, yeah. It's I'm sure you'd recognize a lot of the shots from this movie. So The Third Man is awesome. Check it out by all means. It's certainly worth watching, I believe. Another one that we almost went with, which I would have liked to go with because it's one of my favorite movies, is Milos Forman's Amadeus, which I believe remind me, you've only seen part of this movie, correct?
Yeah. So what happened is that in high school, my music class, we were like, hey, we're gonna watch Amadeus, and it's like, okay, cool. And then they showed us like the downfall of Mozart, and I was like, that's interesting. Like, it's kind of like starting at the end of the thing. Like, how are they gonna go back? And it's just like the end, like they started, the credits started playing. It's like, what? So they only played us like the last 15 to 30 minutes of the movie.
Really?
Yeah. So that's all I've seen of Amadeus.
That's very bizarre. Wow, that must have been strange.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. Well, suffice to say, I highly recommend it. It's just one of the most sprawling, epic, operatic movies I can think of. And I mean,
what I saw was great.
Every second of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I just was like, this is kind of a weird place to start the film. And then sure enough.
So from the director of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and
Milos Forman, yeah.
Yeah, and Man on the Moon and The Fireman's Ball. So
People versus Larry Flint.
People versus Larry Flint, of course, yeah. So we had some other contenders, but those are many of those are eligible for later months. So we'll get to those when the time comes. What we ultimately decided to go with was a movie that was also eligible for August, so we figured, why not? And it has some good bit of synergy because it was released in the same year. It is Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window, as I said before, released in September of 1954. One of the more famous Hitchcock movies, I'd say. Certainly one of the more acclaimed and talked about. It is based on a short story by an author named Cornell Woolrich called It Had to Be Murder. Have you ever heard about this short story or read it?
I haven't read it, no.
I was assigned it last year in one of my English classes at college, and I didn't know beforehand that it was the inspiration for Rear Window. And so as I'm reading it, I'm like, this is really similar to Rear Window, right down to like character names and stuff. And it didn't even, I have such a thick skull. It didn't even hit me until like I was almost done with it. Like, oh, this inspired the movie. That makes sense, doesn't it? So, I wonder if that'll ever happen again. Like I'm reading a book, like this is really similar to Harry Potter. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah. So that was an amusing memory to go back to. Rear Window premiered in the Venice Film Festival in 1954, so I believe it was eligible for a previous month. Didn't win at the time, and then had its world premiere at August 4th in New York, and for what was actually something of a benefit for the aftermath of the Korean War. So had a lot going on, and then of course was released wide on September 1st. It had a budget of $1 million, which was adjusted for inflation is about $9.5 million today. So a very, very low budget, all things considered. And at the box office went on to make $36.8 million, which adjusted for inflation is $351 million. So handily recuperated its budget many times over. Something I was very interesting to find out about this movie is that besides its initial theatrical release, this movie was like almost impossible to see until 1984 through some crazy legal stuff that I couldn't even is crazy to think about now. It was unavailable along with a few other Hitchcock movies that I can't remember off the top of my head. So it's a good thing that it became available again, because I wonder would it have become like The Day the Clown Cried or something, where we never got to see it? So that would have been that would have been very strange. No, probably not. But imagine if this movie was just lost to the ether of time, that would have been crazy. This movie was a Paramount release, and so what happened was the movie takes place in a courtyard with some, a bunch of apartments surrounding it. What I found out is that was all a set. They built that indoors and had to have like 1,000 lights on the ceiling to simulate sunlight. And
I mean, it looks like a set, to be told.
It does.
It's a very detailed one.
But I'd also believe if it was like an actual Greenwich Village style courtyard. And actually what happened was they built the set and they realized like, oh wait, there's not enough floors in the apartment buildings. So they knocked out the ground floor and built what we perceive as the ground level on like the basement of the studio. So that was very interesting to find out. Something else, another little bit of behind the scenes and I didn't know this when we picked the two movies for this month, is that Grace Kelly, who plays Lisa in Rear Window, was offered the role of Edie in On the Waterfront and refused it to play this movie. How crazy is that?
Well, I guess things worked out.
It all worked out fine, I think. So it's interesting to find out these little bits of filmmaking synergy, And what happened was this movie wasn't nearly as successful when it came to award season. It had 4 Oscar nominations, none of which it won. It was director for Alfred Hitchcock, adapted screenplay, color cinematography, and sound recording. And then it later went on to, on the AFI 100 list, make number 42 in 1998 and number 48 in 2007. Rear Window has also been remade several times, the first of which, or most notable which at least, was in 1998 with Christopher Reeve and Daryl Hannah. Have you ever seen that remake, Will?
Which remake?
The Christopher Reeve one?
No. I have seen Disturbia though, which is remake.
Which is like an updated revamp of that.
Yeah.
That's
I think the only remake reboot thing I've seen from Rear Window, if I can recall correctly.
Nice. And how is Disturbia? Is it disturbing?
I mean, it's been like 12 years now, I guess, since I've seen it, but I remember it being fine. Like it was enjoyable as a high schooler seeing it. Yeah, was I high school then? It might have been in middle school when I saw it.
That was 2007, I think.
Let me think. So that would have been... No, I guess it would have been early high school for me.
Dang.
But yeah, no, it was fun. It was enjoyable. I think Shia LaBeouf's performance definitely helped it. As far as making it what could have been a fairly disposable ripoff of a much better film and something that was pretty enjoyable. And I think through his performance felt kind of more organic than what it would have been in the script otherwise, I think.
Nice. Yeah, I would have checked this out just for the novelty factor alone, but we were really under the gun for this episode. So
I mean, the main thing is like he's under like house arrest, so like that's like the foot thing.
So it's like an ankle bracelet thing.
Right, yeah, it's an ankle bracelet, and then like I think there's like some like contrived thing they do like where he's like not allowed to like watch TV or be on the internet or something. So that explains like why he's like looking out the window as opposed to like just being online the whole time.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Like how, like in what world could this be? Like, could this be feasible in a modern setting? And one of the things I came up with was that if someone's in their house for so long, maybe, just maybe, they get so bored with like their TV or the internet or something that they decide to look out the window. But then I thought, no, we'd never get bored with that stuff. So at least they put a little thought into it, I think.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is I do agree with you because I thought crossed my mind while I was watching Rear Windows that it doesn't really feel dated in the way that I felt like On the Waterfront was kind of dated in terms of its filmmaking approach, but definitely felt like a film of its time in that like obviously this is like pre-internet or even like TV being like a mainstream thing or stuff like that. I guess TVs were around, but like they kind of have it makes more sense that like the characters aren't just like he's not just like minding his time reading or watching TV or whatever.
Yeah,
there's some thought put into this character, but at the same time it does definitely feel like a film that like could only really exist for maybe 10 or years later or less actually before. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I can buy the fact that they just like wouldn't have a TV or just wouldn't be interested in it. So I think it's not well, I think that's I don't think they ever explicitly say it, but it's just kind of clear that like he's kind of like a guy who's like often not at home. Yeah.
And so like his like when he is like home ridden or house ridden, like what is there to do for him? And he's just like, well, I guess I'll just check out my neighbors, see what they're up to.
Oh, I'll just take a glance out the window and see what I can find.
I'm surprised we took this long to do the James Stewart's impression, but
it's
I mean,
it's an impressionistic episode for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, I think one thing the film does really well though is like never makes what could have been a really creepy concept like extra creepy. Like we're not like instantly put off by James Stewart's character in a way that I think a lesser filmmaker in a lesser film could have easily just made this like kind of weird and awkward. You get what I mean by that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a credit to Hitchcock that like maybe it's just James Stewart being so like appealing and like as an actor, just as a leading man, just that like he is like just a charming person that we don't feel like, oh, he's like a creepy dude for like basically being a peeping Tom for 2 hours.
I think it definitely is a credit to Hitchcock. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but so be it. I think he's able to stage this scenario in a way that's sort of meant to like sort of shed light on a little like dark part of the human psyche, as opposed to just being sort of exploitative and like, hey, here's what's going on across the street or something like that. So it's really introspective in that way. Before we get any further, I want to ask Will. This is your first time seeing Rear Window, correct?
Yeah.
Nice. And
I mean, all the way through at least. Yeah. I mean, I've seen bits and pieces, but only few and far between.
Yeah. It's and I take it from judging by your praises that you enjoyed it quite a bit. Yes.
Yeah, I really liked it. I mean, probably shouldn't come to much of a surprise that I thought it was a really good film, but yeah, I definitely really enjoyed it. I do have like some mild criticisms about the end, but I mean they're kind of, like I said, very mild and very much stuff that we can talk about later if we have to. But yeah, on the whole, I thought it was really well done.
You're certainly not alone. Something that I realized is that rather by accident, I've watched this movie Rear Window 3 years in a row, all in September, like just through sheer coincidence. I watched it in 2017.
I mean, there's just probably something to be said about like kind of like the colder weather, like kind of like being more house ridden.
Yeah, it could be.
But at the same time, the movie's like so like obviously in the summer because they keep showing the heat.
Yeah.
And stuff, which reminded me a good bit of our last film we talked about, Do the Right Thing.
Yeah.
A little bit. I don't think that was intentional, but I thought that was kind of a neat point in comparison.
Comes to a nice little little button at the end, which I like. But yeah, I think it's and it's not just through like, you know, but this is through like obligation that I've watched it every September, because I watched it for like a homework assignment in 2017, and then for a different homework assignment in 2018, and then for what is functionally another homework assignment, although it's for a podcast, here in 2019. So
didn't you say that because I gave you like we had this like bet that if you would do the Jeff Goldblum impression for like an entire review, that I'd give you money through Venmo, and I think you said you spent that money on your second viewing of Rear Window, if I remember correctly.
Yes,
yeah,
I remember that now, because I talked about that was back when in July of last year. Mm-hmm. Where I talked about 2001: A Space Odyssey as Jeff Goldblum, and then several months later, I was like, "Oh gosh, I need to rent Rear Window for this homework assignment," but I didn't have a job, and so I didn't have any money in my account. But wait, here's $5 from Will Ashton. You completely saved my life that day, so I hope I thanked you for that.
You did, yeah, at least a couple times.
Good. I had totally forgotten about that until just now. That's fantastic. So as it turns out, we have a very personal connection, the two of us, don't we?
I guess this film, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get into what actually happens in the movie a little bit. So once again, if you haven't seen this one, then we're going to sort of get into the details. We're going to be sort of willy nilly about how we go about the plot. So if you don't want to have something ruined for you, and there are reveals and reversals in this, so this is one that you're gonna want to preserve if at all possible. So once again, here we go into Rear Window. So what happens is that it opens on in this apartment complex. As you said, it's very hot. It's somewhere in the 90s at least, if not more than that.
It fluctuates, yeah. Sometimes it's like 90 or something. I think at one point it is like 100 or 110.
Yeah,
so it's really hot.
Nothing to scoff at. As a matter of fact, I actually read that something that happened while they were filming this was that they were using so many like ceiling lights to create artificial sunlight that the heat that was being given off of the lights caused the smoke alarm to go off and the sprinklers to start, and so. In true Hitchcock style, Alfred Hitchcock just like pulled out an umbrella. I don't know where he got it, but just pulled one out and said to a stagehand, like, "Tell me when the rain stops," or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I like
that your Hitchcock has a little bit of Lorne Michaels in it.
It's Lorne Michaels mixed with like Peter O'Toole. I don't know what Hitchcock sounds like, weirdly enough. Besides
good evening,
just sort of a vague voice. Yeah,
there's like a bunch of like Alfred Hitchcock Presents that you can watch. It's like, it's like, I think he's British, but it's like not like a traditional British accent. It's kind of more like drab and drawn out.
Yes, as opposed to Peter O'Toole, who's rather expressive in the way that he speaks. So perhaps not the most apt comparison there is, but one to make nonetheless. Yes, that's one of my impressions I've been working on lately. But we digress, as we often do. I can't
wait to bust out my James Stewart in a moment or two.
I can't wait to hear it. Yeah. So we see from the perspective of Jimmy Stewart's apartment, panning across the various apartment complexes and the inhabitants of which there's a dancer across the street who is nicknamed Miss Torso, which is
like an aerobic dancer of some sort. I think they said.
Right? Something like that, or like a gymnast or something like that.
Yeah. Well, she's like seen dancing like with like a partner, so I guess she might be, I don't know, something like that. Yeah, it's hard to say.
Could be, yeah. There's a musician who lives across the street and plays a piano for a lot of what appear to be a lot of very high society folk.
And that's where the Hitchcock cameo comes in at one point, right? Because like he's like the tuner or something.
He's like winding a clock and just turning around like, "Hey, look, it's Alfred Hitchcock." There he is. Mm-hmm. I happened to look up. I forget the man's name, but did you know that musician is played by the creator of Alvin and the Chipmunks?
Huh.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that my favorite scene with him is there's just like one moment where like he's just like inexplicably like in his boxers,
Yeah.
and like nothing else, like half naked, like sweeping like violently on the carpet, and then he just like plays like 3 notes and then just like pauses and goes back to sweeping. I was like, that's pretty much what the artistic process is like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just like half mad, like multitasking, doing other things while also occasionally coming back. Well, if you, no, that's not, no. It's like, yeah, I that part I really got tickled out.
Yeah. They don't have time to, to contemplate their own artistic creation all the time. They got stuff to do. So
well, just like obviously like he's
why
in his own headspace that like he's like not thinking that like his entire house is windows.
Yeah.
And it's just like half naked, just sweeping angrily and just like not thinking, like so caught up in his artistic process that he's not even thinking about like what he like looks like from an outsider perspective, which is kind of a theme of a movie, of course, but that's neither here nor there.
This is the actor's name, by the way, is Ross Bagdasarian. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. Yeah, created Alvin and the Chipmunks and was also a musician in Rear Window. So we all find our place in life, I suppose.
What if that was like the theme that he, or like the music he was making? The Alvin and the Chipmunks, the Christmas song or whatever.
Goodness. I think they use actual like licensed music. Like I read that they have numbers from Leonard Bernstein musicals who coming up twice in the same episode, and like a Dean Martin track too. So it's that would be very amusing though if Alfred Hitchcock just snuck that in. Alvin and the Chipmunks didn't come out until 1958 though, so this could have been the seed that was planted.
Oh, 50? I thought it was in the 60s that Alvin and Chipmunks came out.
It was a novelty record in 1958, okay. And I think it sort of flowered from there. We're getting off on a huge tangent, but you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way. Also in the apartment complex is a couple who, for some reason that is never specified,
sleep outdoors,
like to sleep on the balcony.
Yeah. And
so at one point it starts raining and they're like, oh no, we gotta go inside, get the mattress.
They also they're the couple with the dog, right? That they
they have a dog that they lower down to the courtyard floor in a basket. So
and not to get off on another tangent, but I'll make this quick. While I was watching the movie, like every time there was that whistle, my dog was like he likes to look out like the door windows, so it was like looking back and forth between like my own little mini dog version of Rear Window, and then like this dog running around that he couldn't place was like in the TV, but he like knew there was a dog around. He's like, where is it? So
that's funny.
I thought that was amusing. Yeah,
it's we all react to art differently, don't we?
Yeah,
regardless of species. And yeah, in the same apartment complex is an older woman who appears to live alone. Who Jimmy Stewart calls Miss Lonely Hearts, and looks like...
They say if she's like a widow or she just never really got into a marriage, or I don't know if they ever specify that.
No, it's never really specified. It's just sort of we just sort of get a vague impression of what their lives are like, and then and to sort of contrast with that, one of the other neighbors is what appears to be a newly married couple who show up at their new apartment. They walk through the threshold and promptly close the shades. So Hitchcock is clearly insinuating that, they're having some sort of honeymoon behind there. So, that's another one. And the final neighbor is a man who lives across the street, played by Raymond Burr, who, you likely know, or not likely, but, who played very famously, the role in I forget the name of the show. What was it? The television show that Raymond Burr was very famous for. Looking it up is I do my research, as you can tell. Perry Mason, that's what it was. It was Perry Mason in Ironside, and I also happen to know that he played the lead role in the American re-edited version of the original Godzilla. So played a journalist named Steve Martin, which amuses me very much. So yeah, Raymond Burr, really kind of tall, imposing, kind of quiet looking guy, but could clearly put up a fight if need be. And what happens is that we see Jimmy Stewart, who is a photographer for a magazine, is laid up with a broken leg as a result of a tragic race car accident.
He was like trying to get like a photo.
Yeah.
Apparently, and then like he like wanted to get a photo no one else could get, and somehow got into like, it's never really specified, but like his leg probably got run over by a NASCAR.
Yeah.
Or something.
Because what happens is we see a picture of a car that appears to be careening toward the photographer, and then right under that photograph is a busted camera. So we can assume that the camera was lost, but the picture was saved. But also lost in the process was Jimmy Stewart's, not his entire leg, but needed to be in a cast for a little while. And
I mean, considering what sounds like a pretty severe accident, like a broken leg for 7 weeks is kind of getting off easy.
It's amazing that that's all that happened. So I would be amazed to see like if someone could do some sort of visual, like, here's what this accident might have looked like a 3D model of Jimmy Stewart. Oh, I'm just going to stand here on the racetrack and try to get a picture of the car.
Sir, you need to get off the track. No, it's okay. I just try to take a picture.
You sound like Michael Caine a little bit when you do it.
I don't know. You gotta get me a little warmed up. I'll get it eventually, I feel.
Fair enough. So we see, so he's got nothing to do. So is taken to just sort of looking out the window, seeing what's going on. And I think it's appropriate that we got into detail on all those neighbors, because it's very much just this sort of superficial appearance of like, what are my neighbors up to? What's going on across the street? I wonder what's going on. Oh, there's Miss Lonely Heart. And one thing I was thinking is, like, for all we know, all of these personalities that Jimmy Stewart's sort of projecting onto the neighbors, for all we know, is completely fictional. Like, one thing I thought of is, what if like Miss Lonely Heart, for instance, what if she's like an actor or something and is rehearsing a scene with someone who's not there? Like, what if that was it, and this is all just an act? But it's all about how something appears versus how it actually is. And what happens... Go ahead.
At one point, I mean, I feel like this was kind of debunked, at least like a little before halfway into the film, but there was like a point where like he kept looking at Miss Lonely Heart, and then like his relationship with Grace Kelly was kind of falling apart. So there was like a small point in the movie where I was like, I wonder if like this is going to lead to him getting with Miss Grace Heart, or with Miss Lonely Heart. But like I was very tickled by the idea of like, he had built like this like almost love affair in his mind, then he like goes to her, and obviously like she has no idea who he is. And he was like, I've come here to tell you I love you. He's like, who are you? He's like, but the window.
Oh, I'm your neighbor. I live across the street. How could you not recognize me?
Yeah, it's like, get out of my house, you strange man. It's like, but I saw you.
All right, well, wheel me out the door at least. That would be nice.
So that kind of tickled me as I was watching the movie.
That's funny. Yeah, no. It's interesting you say that, because actually one thing that's very notable about this movie is that, with the brief exception of like one brief a couple of shots at the end, is that we never leave Jimmy Stewart's apartment. Mm-hmm. Like, although it's not like the interior of it is not always in the shot, but it's always from the perspective of that window, either looking through the camera or just out the window with the eyes. Yeah.
The beginning and the end of the film are like the same shot, right? Like the window.
It's the shades of the window being drawn very slowly.
But like in the beginning of the film, like kind of the camera like it peters out of like the window, and you're kind of like following like James Stewart's gaze, and it's like the reverse at the end of the film, where it's like, well, I guess it kind of ends with Grace Kelly like reading the magazine, but there's like a point towards the end of the shot where like the camera kind of comes back into the apartment the same way that it exited at the beginning of the film.
Yeah,
so I like that.
It's a
good old Hitchcock.
It's a good like sort of palindrome of a beginning and end, and how it contrasts with the state of things before and after. And so I think that's very, very interesting. But yeah, he's very much just sort of projecting meaning onto what he sees. Which feels to me sort of like some sort of metaphor, or maybe just an encapsulation of like what it means to sort of be like a storyteller almost, is to
I took it as like kind of like the journey of a filmmaker in some ways too.
Yeah.
Like we kind of like look into people's lives for like a brief amount of time and just like assume things, but like at the end of the day, like can we really ever really know a person just based on like what we assume from what we see of them?
Yeah.
And so I thought that was pretty compelling.
And I think it's very worth noting that that he gives all these nicknames to his neighbors. He doesn't actually know their names. And in fact, there's a scene sort of like around the middle of the movie thereabouts, where one of the neighbors says like, "Oh gosh, we never talk to each other. We don't know each other."
Yeah, that was a little hammy, I felt. But
a little bit. But I thought it was good that they at least addressed it. And so it amounted to it. One thing I want to mention is that the way this movie is edited is very interesting to me, and I really, really love it. It'll sort of like a scene will happen, and then it'll just sort of fade out and then fade back in, and we don't really know how much time has passed, or like what kind of day it is, or what time of day it is. I mean, in some cases. And in other movies, it sounds like a criticism, but it's actually very effective in communicating sort of this purgatorial, I'm sort of just living here, not really able to do anything, just waiting for something to happen. All the days are blending together, and it's the summer. It's hot. It's endless. And so I really, really dug that. Did you pick up on that editing style?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, just like you said, like have it all in one location and having it all like kind of be like a different intermediate points of time where you don't really know if it's like a day's passed or like a week's passed. I mean, they imply that like he's like it probably was like a week.
Yeah.
Because like he said, he was going to get the cast off. But like the way the film is done, like it could feel like an endless amount of time. And they also like that, like people kind of come in and out of the apartment in a way that like there's like a certain point in the middle of the movie where you wonder, at least I wondered, like, is this all in his head? Like, are these people really here? Like, is he just making them up? Since like we never like see anyone else interact with these people, like outside of like the other characters like that we are introduced. Like, are these like all like this detective, this like hospice lady, and this like girlfriend, are they all like figments of his imagination from like kind of going stir crazy? Did you have that thought in your mind while you're watching it?
I didn't. I must admit.
Okay.
that had never. That'd be interesting to consider though. About how maybe this is all, because I do have one theory about sort of an underlying narrative that this movie is getting at, but nothing quite so Shyamalanian as that, so to speak. So basically to get into like when the plot really gets going, what happens is that he's looking across the street, sees Raymond Burr there, whose wife appears to have some sort of illness that is rendering her to be bedridden. And then it's like late at night, and he's asleep in the chair, wakes up just sort of in a daze, sees Raymond Burr leave the apartment with a suitcase, thinks nothing of it. He's like, oh, okay, well, this is going to sell some jewelry, maybe. And then falls asleep again, wakes up again, sees Raymond Burr come back and leave again. And this happens a couple of times. And then the next morning he's like, what was going on last night with the neighbor across the street? I wonder. And starts to formulate this hunch, because he notices that Raymond Burr's wife, is no longer in the house. Like, she's gone without a trace. And he starts to think, I'm starting to think he might have murdered his wife in cold blood. And thus begins one of the most suspenseful goddamn movies I've ever seen. Like, did you think so too? Did you find it as suspenseful as I did? Because this movie is riveting after that point.
Yeah, certainly, and like especially towards the end, it got really suspenseful for me. But I think, yeah, like the thing that stood out to me as I was watching is that I feel like there's like this kind of like weird like lack of distinction for some people between like what a thriller is and what a horror movie is. And like I think people kind of use both terms kind of interchangeably. I'm probably guilty of that as well.
Yeah.
But like if you like wanted like a good example of like what a straight thriller would be, I feel like this is like a pretty perfect definition of like what a thriller is.
Yeah.
Cause it's like not like anything. There's like very little like horror stuff in it, but like you said, it's like constantly like unnerving and like tense in a way that like there's like kind of like this like ticking clock and this like building suspense of what's happening.
Yeah.
But nothing like you don't think like there's like little like you don't think like something. Well, like, there is like a threat of like people getting hurt, but like it's more about like building the tension, like just not knowing. And I think that really makes it like a great example of like what a thriller is as opposed to a horror film.
Interesting. I hadn't considered that. I just sort of I had always just gone with like, yep, this is a through and through thriller, and one of the better ones, I think, because what this movie is really good at is, and this comes from the short story, but it's good at having these things happen across the street that we see from the perspective of the window that could be interpreted as either the activities of a murder or a perfectly sensible man. Like it's, oh hey, I'm washing a knife. Well, so would a murderer, but also so would a regular just a regular person. Hey, I'm getting frustrated at this dog that's digging in my garden outside. So would anyone, but maybe there's a body buried there. So it's really, and I love that it takes so long for us to figure out like what is actually going on. And even then it's sort of like, wow, that sort of came out of nowhere, to the point where the ending sort of happens really quickly. Didn't you think?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of getting into what I felt like. I mean, like I said, like my only real criticisms with the movie are towards the end, where like they kind of lose the ambiguity that I felt was really intriguing throughout the first 3/4 of the movie.
Yeah.
And then like once they kind of just decide that like, I mean, are we allowed to say this like spoilers, or we?
Yeah, we let them know that we're getting
just making sure before I got ahead of myself. Like once they just make it clear that he is like basically the killer, and he like tries to push James Stewart out of the window.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was still, yeah, right, yeah. But like I felt like that was really well done, but it also kind of killed like what I felt was so impacting about all the stuff leading up to that, where we just like didn't know if it was like the like ramblings of a crazy man that he just kind of convinced these two other people to believe in, possibly three, because it's not really clear if the detective is like believing him or just kind of indulging him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I felt like that was more intriguing than like the end just kind of being like, yep, I am such the man that you thought I was, and I am now going to kill you.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, but at the same time, like it's like there's only one of two endings I feel like they could have gone. It's either like he is a crazy, like James Stewart is like making it all up, and like he's just like a perfect normal man, and he's just like going crazy in his house, or he is actually a killer. And to me, they kind of picked the less interesting of the two.
Really?
But I mean, I don't know. I feel like it would have been more interesting if it was implied that like he was just like a perfectly sensible man, and he was just like kind of connecting dots that weren't really there. But,
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not gonna tell Hitchcock what to do.
Well, you couldn't, even if you wanted to.
Right.
Yeah, that's the thing I think is interesting about this movie, is that it's very much a story about the what's the word? The end justifying the means, because these are by definitions like what James Stewart and Grace Kelly and Thelma Ritter, who plays the nurse character,
like a hospice, I think.
Yeah. It's or the insurance nurse, I believe.
Yeah.
What they're doing is, by most accounts, an invasion of privacy. Specifically,
well, yeah, they break and enter into a house at least twice.
Even before that, though, I feel like it's when it's when Jimmy Stewart says like, hand me that camera over there so I can get a closer look. That's when it becomes sort of this complicit invasion of, you know, what the neighbors are up to, because it's hard to deny at that point, like, oh, I was just glancing out the window, officer. It can't really go that much further. It's clear that they're deliberately spying on the neighbors at this point.
But the movie makes a point to address that, and James Stewart's like, well, they could do the same for me, I suppose.
Well, there's nothing stopping them, really. The window's open, the sun's out, it's hot outside. What are we supposed to do? Nothing, really. It's but yeah, they engage in these very, what would be if what you're proposing had been true, and it turns out like, nothing was going on. If that had turned out to be true,
like his like wife was like, you know, like on a business trip or something, and like would have been a
much more pessimistic movie. I think it makes it an interesting pairing with On the Waterfront, in that it comes to this conclusion that is almost not as much as On the Waterfront, but it is, I found to be almost a call to action, because basically what happens is that they find out like the guy is a murderer. There's all this business with the police, and there's this really just striking shot where Raymond Burr realizes that he's being watched, and for the first time in the movie looks directly into the camera, and it's like, oh man, it's going down. That gets me every time. And comes across the street. They have a skirmish, but everything turns out all right. And then it's this. And, I
was gonna say, the like, camera flash thing is, I think I'd seen that before, or like referenced somewhere. So because I knew that going in, like I knew like the camera flash before it happened. So I forget if I'd seen that somewhere or what, but that's all I had to say.
It seems like something that would be referenced elsewhere in pop culture, so I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, there's a skirmish. It turns out that a guy did murder his wife. It's kind of crazy. But then the movie ends with this tracking shot that we alluded to earlier, going back through all the apartments, in which the denizens of which seem to be noticeably happier than they have been throughout the movie. For instance, Miss Torso has a partner who appears to be coming back from some sort of what's the word?
Like a war veteran or like a Navy soldier or something.
Yeah, something like that. I forget which.
And I like that like he's like a very like kind of dorky short dude.
Yeah.
Like she's like, you know, like your typical like blonde like hourglass figure, and just like is madly in love with this kind of like short stocky war guy. Yeah. It's just like, it's cute. It's just like kind of like a weird little sight gag that I enjoyed.
Yeah. And the couple who had the dog who was killed in the process, they have a new dog. They seem to be doing well. The married couple have opened their shades and are doing what married couples do, just sort of bickering and being married or so. Lisa and
noticeably happier.
Yeah, is noticeably happier.
No, I find it funny that like you're saying everyone's happier, but like now, like it seems like their marriage is taking a turn for the worse. So I guess everyone but them.
No, it's just happy. Married couple speak is the sense I get. It's like they're not. This is not divorce material, but they've
they're married now.
They've settled into their marriage. And things seem to be going okay. Miss Lonely Hearts seems to have a new partner, so things are going well. And then Jeff just has this big grin on his face, and we pan down, and there's 2 casts on the legs.
Yeah, that was a good joke.
I get this sense that like justice has been restored in this little courtyard. Like some sort of infection has been removed in the form of Raymond Burr. And that was sort of, without really being sort of explicit about it, was sort of infecting the community. But like once this is gone, then everyone's fine. The temperature's down. Everyone's fine again.
He even changed the weather.
The weather has changed. Everything is fine. The world can sleep well again. And so it was at this point where I realized, like, I wonder, like, this movie seems to me, and this could be, and I very well may just be projecting meaning onto this. It almost seems like a story of essentially, entertaining what retirement might be like. Just thinking, what if I had nowhere to go, nothing to do? What would I do? And as it turns out, I would save the neighborhood from who knows what else might have happened. And you can see these, the three characters sort of getting this adventurous, fervor about it. Like, yeah, we're going to catch a murderer. This is going to be fun. And so I get this very positive, message about, like, you know what, it may be sort of, suspicious or unwanted, but we have sort of an obligation to, if not, spy on our neighbors, then to sort of, keep an eye on them or something and just know what's going on with everyone, because otherwise, who knows what might happen. And I think that's very interesting message coming from Alfred Hitchcock. Who is very much about getting into sort of the psyche and the dark underbelly of humanity, and so someone's got to make sure that it doesn't get out of hand. And so it's like this call to action, like, keep an eye on those around you, for you never know who might be a murderer under your very nose. Like, did that occur to you in any way?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I didn't get the retirement angle of it, but the rest of it did come to mind. Yeah. It's a movie that I find very rewatchable. Like, it has not gotten worse with age, in any way, shape, or form. I think, again, it is just, above all else, it is just suspenseful and has so much tension in it, and really, and it just, the restraint it has to not have, like, any interactions with Raymond Burr until, like, towards the end. So I think that makes for a lot of suspense. It's a real crackerjack movie, and I think it's as good as ever, more or less. Yeah, I mean, this is only my first viewing, as you said, so I'm just coming in with the fresh eyes. But yeah, I think it's really solid, and it was a good one to cross off my list.
Yeah, I think that leaves it on a very nice note. I think it's a Rear Window, solid movie. Don't have a bad word to say about it. So yeah, that was our August/September extra milestone. We fell way behind on this one, so we just, needless to say, we apologize for that. So we know that there are a lot of listeners who really look forward to these. Hopefully this lived up to your expectations. When it comes to,
I think it needed more Jimmy Stewart, personally.
Oh, well, anything could use a little more Jimmy Stewart when you think about it.
Could you do the next films in the Jimmy Stewart impression?
With the candidates for October?
Yeah, to talk about the October movies with Jimmy Stewart here.
I'll see what I can do. I'll do my best. I don't want to make any promises, but we'll see what happens. All
right, Jimmy, tell us what's up.
Oh, well, I'll be glad to. So,
or do you want me to be Jimmy as well, talking to you, fellow Jimmy Stewart, about the new movies? It's up to you.
Well, let's see here. I'm trying to just pull up the list. Okay. So
two
next
Jimmy
one,
Stewarts.
So
talking about,
I'm going to do this in my normal voice first. So, okay. One thing, that we decided that, we want to, make clear here is we're going to sort of change up our approach for, how we go about selecting the movie next month. 'Cause it's turned out to be kind of, in a way, the hardest step of the process is just deciding which one.
Yeah.
So previously, what we've done for the past few months is just listing every single candidate, and some sort of poll, and then sort of using that as a guideline as to how, where the listeners stand. But we decided for this month, we're going to sort of whittle it down a little bit, And the ones that don't make it onto the poll, we'll mention, as we did this time, sort of real quick at the beginning, as just here's what we didn't select. But your options for this month, and this is where I'll go into Jimmy Stewart, and
Sure.
appropriately so, because our first option is Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Can you believe that?
Oh, I think that'd be a pretty swell movie.
It'd be just fine. A little patriotism, a little excitement, and some American dream reaffirmation. I think that could be nice. Celebrating.
I think it'll be great to see me punch some politicians in the face.
Oh yeah, punch them in the face with my optimism. That's what this world needs.
I just need to get the point across. Sometimes my words don't get through.
I will stand for as long as I have to stand to make the world understand.
I mean, words get the point across at the end, but just before you just gotta punch a guy sometimes.
Oh, yes. I like where this is going. This is going to be very weird. Our next candidate is a movie called The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Sounds very violent.
Scary.
Yeah. I wonder, it's a chainsaw massacre in Texas.
If I didn't know better, I'd say he was a murderer.
I'd say he's up to no good. That's what's happening here. Oh, yes. And then another one of our other candidates for October is a movie called Once Upon a Time in America, which was a candidate recently, but lost by quite a bit. So we're giving it another chance here. It's another story about America, which is always a good thing.
Yeah. Jimmy Stewart here doesn't really have much else to say about that movie.
Oh, man. And here we go.
But it sounds pretty good.
Yeah. And here's another one. We have a movie called The Terminator, which sounds more violent than the last.
A lot of violence in these movies.
Well, it's October. It's the season for a little spookiness, wouldn't you say?
Maybe so, but I just think people should care about their fellow man.
It's time that we got together as a neighborhood and did something for a change.
But I think the Terminator was coming out when I died.
Oh well, so
what's that movie?
Is appropriate. Who knows? Maybe I was the final victim. The world may never know.
Oh, wait. Well, I'm sorry. I found out I died in 1997.
Oh, wow. I was around for a while.
So I was around longer than I thought.
Man, it's amazing how life and death become one by the end.
Oh, man. I had a pretty long life.
Yeah, this nothing to scoff at or sneeze at in any way. And our final option for the month of October is a movie called Ed Wood, which I haven't seen, and I've heard
one
very
of my
good
personal
things.
favorites.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Now on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most.
Yeah.
How obnoxious do you think this is to the listeners?
Oh, I gotta say a 9.
Oh yeah, I think you're right about that. Oh, we're out of our minds. Okay, so yeah,
that was fun.
In case you didn't get that, so that was fun. I'm glad we did that.
Yeah, I did.
Our options are Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, celebrating 80 years, which is another movie that's not as talked about, just probably because of age, but would be cool to get into. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which would be a fun kind of Halloween thing to do.
Yeah, I recently rewatched that one, but
oh yeah,
would be curious to. Yeah, I watched it about 2 or 3 months ago again.
Nice.
I'd seen it obviously before that, but
yeah. Another one is Once Upon a Time in America, Sergio Leone's sort of gangster crime epic, which is awesome.
Only one of these I haven't seen, I don't think.
Yeah, which remains true from the month of June, where it was previously eligible. The Terminator, the first one, which will I didn't even realize this until you pointed it out to me, will be appropriate because the Terminator Dark Fate is coming out. So maybe we can go back to where it all started.
And I believe the full movie is available for free on YouTube as we speak.
The first Terminator?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Interesting. Is it in like the public domain or something?
I don't know. Like YouTube has like some movies like kind of similar to IMDb.
Oh yeah, with ads,
free on their
right?
site. Yeah, with ads. Yeah, but
I prefer mine all in one go. But if need be, then that is good to know that that's where it can be found. And Ed Wood, which is the only one that I haven't seen, and I've heard no shortage of great things about. So
I love it. Yeah,
would be
probably my favorite Burton.
Would be nice to finally check this one out. So those are your options for October. Thank you so much again for listening to the Extra Milestone, however late it might be, and however devoid of John Negroni it might be. So hopefully next month we'll be able to get back. We'll be able to get back on track in some way. I certainly hope.
Who needs John when you got Jimmy? I just hope that I'm coming back, Jimmy.
Oh yeah, we're not going anywhere. We're staying right here.
Have a good one, you guys.
Yeah.
I gotta get going though, so I gotta say goodbye.
You're absolutely right. Okay, so real quick, just don't forget, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, however you listen to it. Helps us out a lot. Come and hang out with us on Facebook and Twitter, all the social medias. I know Will's very good about handling that, so I eternally thank you for that.
It's just
Will.
Me, Jimmy.
Oh, well. My apologies, sincerely. I can't believe I forgot. And if you have anything you want to say, email us at cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. Always good to hear some feedback from the listeners. With that was the Extra Milestone for the months of August and September. From the Internet Colorado, I'm Sam Noland.
And from the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Jimmy.
Oh, always good to have you, Jimmy. And we'll see you on the next occasion.
Bye.